Welcome to the Young, Dumb, and in Love podcast, where we talk about all things marriage.
Our goal is to help equip you to have a marriage that is better than you have ever imagined by sharing real-life experiences, getting into the nitty-gritty, and sharing practical ways you can start today. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to Young, Dumb, and in Love. We're so grateful that you guys are here with us today. We have some special guests. They're actually our pastors at our church. And so if they say something kind of funny today, just know that we go to the best church ever.
The first time my pastors are younger than me, you guys.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Making me feel like an old lady.
Why'd you have to bring that up?
We should be interviewing you today.
No.
Yeah, let's swap seats.
No, I just love it. I love it. It's like, it's so fun. I'm like, I'm old now.
Yeah.
Well, Adam and Juliette, why don't you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves and just tell us a little bit about who you are and maybe even just how you met.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead, babe. Ladies
Well,
first.
I'm Juliette, and this is Adam.
Hi. I have her do my introductions all the time.
We have been married for 12 and a half years now. It'll be 13 years in September. Been together for 13 and a half years. We met in Sydney, Australia, which is where I am from, at Bible College. And it's a funny story, actually, because we were actually in the same intake at Bible College. We were in the same tutorials.
Does that mean class?
Yep, same
Okay.
classes.
Intake,
Yeah,
okay. Okay.
Yeah, this is good. You need to like.
We're
No,
gonna
you're
learn. We're gonna
good.
learn today.
I love it. I'm like
Australian
intake. That is intake. Okay.
And so we were in the same year, same classes, and it was just funny how it all worked out. So we knew each other for about a year and a half before we started dating.
Yeah, I used to like bribe her friends to save me seats next to her.
Oh, I love it. Did she catch on? Did you catch on?
I actually didn't catch on. I just
thought the seat is always
I
open.
really,
It's so strange.
I'm curious in how you bribed them. What did you bribe them with?
I didn't have anything to bribe them with, actually. I was just like, please.
So you really baked.
I did.
right.
I was
I
shamelessly
know you.
begging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's actually kind of a funny story because we were on like a leadership team together at Bible College, and the teacher who was running that kind of set us up and organized for us to like tag team at chapel one day. And so we had to tag team preach and come like together for a sermon, and it was just hilarious.
Yeah.
And
he's like, hey, Adam, I'm going to need you to meet with Juliette and make sure your sermons like they work together, because you're going to go back to back, and it's going to be, and I was like, sweet. The coffee shop right down the road.
Yeah.
So that was like your first date?
Yeah. It was.
Little did she know it was.
Little did you-
Love that it was writing a sermon. That's very
I know,
fitting.
so
You know?
funny.
And we didn't
Love
even
it.
get to the sermon. We didn't even talk about the sermon.
No, we
I just
didn't
had
at
like
all.
1,000 questions. written. I
Yeah,
was like,
which I was impressed by your question asking. You know, that struck me. I was like, okay, this man knows how to ask questions, and that was
it's
that was
decreased
important to
since
me.
then, my ability to ask questions.
But the funny story is the guy that set us up, his daughter is actually here in Phoenix now.
Okay.
And she goes to our church. Yeah. And it's so crazy, this full circle moment where
That's really fun. I
life,
love that.
hey,
I love
yeah.
I was at a coffee shop the other day, and there was this first date going on, and he was asking lots of questions.
Oh,
Wow.
She was
So maybe there's a
answering, and I
chance.
was laughing, and then he said one thing. He said, wouldn't it be funny if ducks were humans? And I turned,
He
looked
ran
at
out
him.
of questions.
He ran out of questions. You know, because they quack and they walk funny, and I was like,
boy,
oh
it's
no,
going
it's going south. Stop talking.
Go to the bathroom.
It's so funny.
Hurry, stop. Go to the bathroom. Come up.
That's so
Ask
good.
ChatGPT for more questions.
Perfect.
I can't imagine going on a first date.
Me either, honestly.
honestly,
I'm so
though.
grateful I don't have to do that again.
Oh my goodness.
Honestly.
100%.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so you meet
Yes.
and then you get married in Sydney or here? Okay, because
Yeah.
Adam is obviously
Yeah.
from here.
Yeah, so I grew
Not
up in
Arizona,
Washington
but-
State.
Okay.
Same with you guys.
Yeah.
Washington State.
Yeah.
Shouts out to the Pacific Northwest. Yeah, and like I decided to stay longer and study,
Okay.
and we started dating, and then we got married in Sydney, and a bunch of my family got to come over. It was so cool. They're like, yeah, the chance to go to Australia, like we're there. And then we stayed.
Yeah.
We stayed for, well, I think it was like a total of 14 years or something like that. 13 years in Australia.
Yeah.
Wow.
For me.
Yeah.
So I became a citizen and everything like that. Thanks, babe. Appreciate
You're welcome.
it. Got me in there. But yeah, and then we were working on staff at a church for that whole time after we graduated college.
Okay.
And then in 2020, great time to move back to the States. We moved back here.
Terrible time to move. Yeah, it's rough.
Yeah, good introduction from my wife to America.
Hey, welcome to America. It's 2020.
Yeah.
It was a lot.
We all know
It was
how
a lot,
2020.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Going head on with the truck.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So you moved to Phoenix.
Yeah.
And you start working at a church at that time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we came for a role specifically.
Yeah.
Started working. It like everything was going great, and did that for about 2 years. 2 years, almost to the day actually.
Yeah.
And then there's a few transitions that happened. A few things took place, and then we found ourselves planting a church in our living room.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
I love,
crazy.
Which has been, is that about a year and a half ago you
A
started?
year and a half. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it was June 2022 that we had our first gathering of about 15 people in our living room. And it's just been a crazy journey since then. Yeah, we would meet weekly and outgrew our living room. I mean, we have a tiny living room, so that's hard to do. And then we ended up moving into the backyard of our house, and we started doing, services in the backyard of our house. And then last Easter Sunday, we officially launched as a church, and it's been a crazy journey.
So it's almost a year then.
Yeah, coming up on a year.
Coming up on it.
Which is amazing.
Very exciting.
Which I love. And so just to kind of, and then we'll talk really more specifically about your marriage. Sorry, sometimes this microphone drives me crazy. You guys experienced, some church things that happened. You weren't sure if you were going to be planting a church, and then you planted RKO Church, which we attend. And I know for us, just as an observation, like we struggled to find a place to land when we moved to Phoenix. We went several churches, and that feeling just, it wasn't, we're like, well, this isn't terrible. We wouldn't say anything bad about where we had been going, but it just never felt like home,
right?
And then we came to RKO. Actually, Julianne was not coming with me. I was like, everyone's going to think I'm a single mom or that maybe my marriage is struggling. I started thinking like, man, people might think like we're going through something.
Right. Yeah, I was leading worship,
he was leading worship at another church.
Yeah.
And I went, and, my daughter really loved it. And then my other daughter loved it. And I was like, Julianne, I think this might be where we should go to church. And this is where we've now been. It's almost been, I guess almost a year, like in May, June, like right after you guys launched. But just to watch, you guys be faithful to the Lord's calling on your life was such a blessing to us, because we have seen, some leadership that made our view, specifically probably more me, I'm going to speak for myself, tainted of what having a pastor would look like. And I really, if I'm being honest and transparent, felt like maybe I'll never really have that again.
Right.
And that's okay. I can lean into Jesus and I'll go to church because I feel like that's what I need to be doing, but I'll just never really trust the people I lead.
That's real.
And,
that's real.
To watch you guys be so honest and transparent in your life is such a beautiful and refreshing thing. And so we just say like, thank you for doing that. And I know that's how I can speak for the people of RKO Church. I hear that over and over echoed, like they're just so real. They're just so honest. They're just so vulnerable with what's really going on in their lives. And I think that's refreshing. I think that's really what the church is looking for, the church as a whole. Now, I think we've seen the fancy and the blingy, and there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. But people are ready for the real, the raw. How are we going to do this? Like, teach me about Jesus. I want to know the gospel. I want to know, is there hope? Is there peace? How am I going to do this? And so I just would say thank you from us, but that's been a beautiful thing to watch, just as you've been faithful to the Lord. Yeah. So, cause I know it's not easy. Like
it's true.
Starting a church is not something I personally would want to do.
Honestly, I don't think I would have signed up if I had.
So we just admire you, and we're grateful that you've been faithful to the Lord on your life.
So if you're looking for a church and you're in Phoenix, Chandler, Tempe, this is the church, RKO Church. We'll put the link in the the notes, and you'll see it right there.
No, thank you. That does mean so much. It's like,
I'm really grateful.
Because it's a very vulnerable thing to start something. Juliette, you were preaching the other day and talking about how it's like throwing yourself a birthday party every week, and like, are people going to come?
Is anyone going to show up?
Oh,
Is this going to be like good for people? Is it going to be impactful? Like, is God going to show up? Because this is the thing with church, is this gigantic intangible that is the Holy Spirit that we're working with. And it's like, okay, I can't dictate to God what he's going to do.
Yeah.
Right.
We can just prepare the best we can. So hearing real life stories of people going, oh, okay, we found home is just the best thing in the world.
Everything.
It's everything for us. And we love you guys as well, because we knew you before.
I know. So it's so funny how, like you said, full circle moments.
Yeah. Totally. There's been so many of those over the last year or so.
I mean, your sister is one of my best friends and worked with Julian.
We shared an office for
and so it's just so funny how God does work things
and she always talked about you, and I never actually met you until
when
we all moved to Phoenix.
There we go.
Yeah, when we moved to Phoenix, we originally, which we've told people before, like moved down for Julian to work at a church, and that didn't work out. And you're like, oh, did we mishear you, Lord? Like, is that not right? And Archeo hadn't started, and it's like, okay, Lord, aren't you so faithful that you brought all these people to Phoenix over the last few years? And we're all like, oh, we don't know where we're going. And then here's Archeo.
That's insane.
And now all these people are there. So we're grateful for that.
We're so grateful.
It is crazy. I think looking back over the last, it'll be 4 years in July since we moved here. And there's moments where you look back on seasons of grief and loss and things not working out or looking different than what you thought. And it's easy to think, oh my gosh, look at everything that's happened to me. Look at all these things that have happened. But I think, honestly, truthfully, the testimony for us is like, look what God has brought us to and how everything has led to this moment. Yeah. That has been such a beautiful testimony of the faithfulness of God to us. Not so much like, look at what happened, but look where God has brought us to. Yeah. And I can see the hand of God over all of it, and that everything has led us to this moment now. And so that's been a cool story for us for sure.
No, that's amazing.
Yeah. Well, planting a church is obviously a very stressful thing. And a lot of people make pivots in their life. They make job changes. They move across the country. They have kids. There's so many different things, right? There's so many different things that marriages go through. Yeah. And a lot of marriages can't stand the test because it's just too hard. And they give up on each other because they don't have the right tools in their belt to continue their marriage together. And so instead of working on their marriage, they just give up and they call it quits and they move on. And they think that it just affects them, but it affects everyone around them, the life that they've built, their kids and all that stuff. And so for you guys, you not only started a church, but you moved not across the country, you moved to a different country, to a new place at the worst time possible. Things didn't work out where you guys were at. You ended up planting a church. Your kids are going through. You're in a new. I mean, everything is new. There's just chaos.
I'm like, okay,
chaos is the right way.
I just think about you might have anxiety, right? Yeah. And so for you, my question, just to start this off, is really like, what is the secret sauce that kept you guys afloat? Because I know that there were fights. I know that there were hard times and things. And I know that there were times where you looked at your bank account and there was nothing in it. Yeah, and we were like, okay, Lord, what are we going to do? So what is the secret sauce? What is the thing that kept you guys above water and together?
Great question.
Such a good question. I think that's kind of like the question that is copied and pasted to so many scenarios, because people face issues, right? You face issues if you're looking at like an NBA press conference, or if you're looking at, someone who's playing in the symphony, or if you look at everyone has different problems, but they create similar emotions and similar turmoil inside, even though they're different scenarios. Yeah. So I think that question it's so relatable, but at the same time, I'm just one of those people that I don't believe it has an answer, the secret sauce. It's not like Space Jam where you can just take Michael Jordan's special. But if you notice in that scenario as well, I love Space Jam. Like Bugs just slaps water in there and then puts like a sign on it and says it's Michael's special stuff, Yeah. And it's like, there's not special stuff. It's inside of us. Yeah. And for me, and I know for us, because we've had this conversation, the Holy Spirit is what keeps us grounded, like 2 feet on the ground, even when anxiety attacks, for sure. I had a few of those. Totally. Arguments. Yep. 100%. We had plenty of those. But our identity, our foundation, that's what you have to keep coming back to in moments like that. The struggle, that is God for us. That's the Holy Spirit. And in the Bible, it says that he is our helper.
Yeah.
And so like, that means that we're going to go through stuff we need help with.
Yeah.
So that means he's there.
Yeah.
And it's up to us now to either go, okay, I'm going to take the hand that you have extended or not.
Yeah.
And I think that's more of the challenge than, oh, how do we do this? It's more of, I have to be humble enough to take his hand and receive the help.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also very difficult because, again, you can't see him right in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
He's not a class that you can take. He's not a counselor that you can see, which that was one of the things that helped us so much was counseling.
Yeah. Absolutely.
For sure, with our marriage and individually.
Yeah.
But for me, if I boiled it down to one simplistic thing, it's like it's the Holy Spirit. He's my helper.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so he's the one that got me through and still gets me through every day because I still need it.
Yeah.
Yeah, to simplify it, I guess.
For sure. Yeah. I think one thing we learned early on in marriage as well is recognizing that we're on the same team, you know, and that actually took us a minute to figure out, to be honest. Like we definitely didn't fight fair in those early few years of marriage, you know, when we're learning how to handle conflict. It took us a minute to realize, okay, we're on the same team and we're two different people, two different personalities. It's not my job to change him. It's not his job to change me. That is not the goal of marriage. The goal of marriage is not to change one another. It's to learn one another and figure out how to be on the same team. And so I think coming into any decision that we've made, any big life choice, coming up against grief and loss again, facing those head on, knowing that we're on the same team. And as long as we're together, it really doesn't matter what else happens. Like as long as we're on the same page, as long as we, you know, are doing this together, we can face anything for sure. Yeah. It doesn't mean it's easy.
No, look, we used to drive together to work in Sydney for a time, and we had the smallest car in the world. And we would just, for some reason, like the car, I don't know if you ever find yourself arguing in the car with your spouse. But for some reason, it's just like the incubator for arguments. It's like you can't go anywhere.
No, you're trapped.
And then all of the external factors of like this traffic light is still red.
Running late.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And we're like, you know, we're having a little argument one morning on the way to work, and we're at this traffic light. I remember exactly where we were. And Jules, you were just like, oh, you're like my little brother right now. And I was like, you're like my big sister. Oh my gosh. And this
honestly,
epiphany.
It was a light bulb moment. Yeah. We were like, we realized we were fighting like siblings.
Like children.
Like our childhood roles. I was the oldest child. He was the, you know, the second. And so I was bossy. And he pressed all my buttons. And we just had this moment where we were
explode,
like,
and I blame it on her.
That's right.
Wow.
She hit me.
Really?
That's us too.
And it was totally this light bulb moment where we were like, we are literally acting like children.
Wow.
It was huge.
Okay, how do we take a step back and function as adults?
Yes. That's something we talk a lot about. And we talk a lot about communication and really boiling it down to, okay, what is really going on here? Because, you know, the thing is never the thing.
That's right. Yeah.
Like,
it's so true.
Ever.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, I don't think it ever is the thing, you know? And how oftentimes it's those childhood things. That you're like, I'm acting like I did as a child, or that bothered me as a child, or I felt triggered, or whatever it looks like. And so we always encourage people, like, do some of that. Like, ask yourself, what is really going on right now? Why am I reacting this way? Is this how I acted as a child? We're also oldest and baby boy, old mom. So yes, like there's times I'm just like, you not so much now. I mean, obviously we've been married 18 years now, so we've been able to work through those things.
Right.
But there were a lot of times I'm like, there's a dirty clothes basket. Why are your undies next to it? Put it in the basket.
Like,
it's there.
You know, like, and he's like, what? It's fine. You know, just like, oh, I'm like, do you just do it on purpose?
Now our daughter will do the same exact stuff that I do, and I'm like, drives me nuts.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, I get it now. I am so sorry.
That has been a funny, like, as you see your children.
Oh, that is real.
Because I think that's probably another, which I love what you said about being on the same team. That is a huge, I feel like it's such a simple thing, but such an ephany that if you realize, like, we are working towards the same goal, you know, and we can't allow this division to come in because it's really a distraction from our purpose, our calling, what we're supposed to be doing. And it's holding us back. So if we can, you know, move through it, you know, but I'm sure for you guys have 3 kiddos.
Yeah.
Did you find that you like felt like, okay, like your kids, we had kids like 5 or 6 years into marriage. So we had a little more time.
Yeah.
But your kids start growing up and you're like, oh, that's me. And now you learn. You're like, goodness, that's maybe not my best quality. I love that in my child, and I love my child, but I can see why maybe my spouse gets irritated with that, because you find yourself getting irritated about stuff that you do. You're like, I do that. Yeah. And that irritates me.
It's so true. Having children for sure sheds light on you.
Oh my God.
Yes, absolutely.
It does for sure.
Yes. First marriage, then your kids, and you're like, wow, what's next? What's next? What else is going to, starting a church.
Hey. And then in there, throw it on.
So what would you guys say, like some tangible, communication skills or tips that you guys have used that have helped you learn how to communicate better and maybe work through those arguments quicker and more, like, what would be the good word? Effectively. Like more effectively, you know, where you're like, okay, we can work through these more effective.
Yeah. Good question.
Great question. I think to answer that appropriately, like you mentioned, you have to start back to where you developed some of the tendencies that you have. There's a book called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, and it changed the way I viewed myself and my spirituality and my emotional maturity. I was like, I am, because he goes through this list in one point. He's like, you are an emotional infant if this is your response to a situation. And he rates like your development and your emotional resilience. I don't know if that's right. Anyway, I was sitting there listening to this book. I was doing an audiobook, and I was like, I'm an emotional adolescent. And I was so
cold out right now.
By it. I was like, what on earth? So for me, going back to like family origins is the beginning of that answer. Because so often in society today, we seek to copy and paste. You just slap a microwave solution to something because it's difficult and we want to fix it. But if you want lasting change, it takes hard work and a lot of it.
Absolutely.
It's the same with church. It's the same with marriage. It's the same with anything. So going back to family of origin and looking at, like, for us, for example, the big differences of an issue that arose in our communication was we came from very different communication styles. So like for me, I'll speak for me. And if you want to speak for your family a little bit, like I was raised in a military home. My dad's a drill instructor, like a drill sergeant in the military. And then he's been a police officer for the last 30 plus years. And now he's a sheriff. And so he's basically like the G.I. Joe. And I was homeschooled in a very small town and very, very just farmland, me and the cows and the cornfields. And like, so that was the picture, was, okay, dad was everything. And it's respect, and it's very orderly. And my mom homeschooled us, and she did that well. And like, that's where I came from, was yes, sir, no, ma'am. We read Proverbs every night together as a family before going to bed. Like I would have friends sleeping over. Okay, listen, come with me. I would have a friend over. I'm a 14-year-old, right? Friends coming over. We're going to play paintball tomorrow. We have it all planned out. And my dad's like, all right, guys, it's time to come in the living room.
Oh my gosh. Time for the Proverbs.
We would lay on the ground in the living room, and my dad would read a proverb. Now, Dad, if you ever watch this, I love you for that, actually. But then I didn't at the time, you know?
You were horrified.
Look, just go with it. It'll be over soon. Like, it's short. You know, I just talked to my friends. I'd warn them. But like, if there was an issue that would arise in the family, stop everything, and we're going to sort this out right now.
Okay. Yep.
And that's where I came from. So you gotta go for where you came from.
And then I grew up in a very laid back Australian culture. My dad's a diesel mechanic. My mum she was a kindergarten teacher for 20 something years. And we were excellent at just sweeping things under whatever we could find, you know, in a heated moment, just removing ourselves from the situation. We'll go take a shower. We're going to calm ourselves down. We come back together. And we carry on as if nothing's happened.
Which is so opposite. I mean, that is
completely
opposite.
So then coming together and having someone, you know, when I would have moments of frustration and was used to having space to process. And then having him come in and be like, we need to talk about this now. I mean, it was just a recipe for disaster.
Also, I was homeschooled again, like I said. So my EQ was like maybe a 5 out of 100.
Come on.
I didn't know when to give her that space.
Maybe a 6.
Maybe a 6. Thank you.
I'm kidding.
Yeah.
It was a recipe for disaster. So we really, I mean, our arguments in the first year of marriage were intense. Yeah. They were intense. And we really had to learn how to, again, be on the same team. And it's, I don't win if, he loses it. And he doesn't win if I lose the plot. Like the goal is actually reconciliation. And the goal is to be able to grow and learn from each other and figure out how does this not happen again? That's the goal. Yeah. And so we had to talk through that a whole lot and recognize, okay, if I need a second to calm down, I will always come back for, to resolve the conversation, but I need that space. And he had to learn how to give that to me, and I had to learn to always come back and have the conversation, not sweep it under the rug. So some major things that we had to learn there in the first few years of marriage. And then honestly, because we lived in Sydney, Australia, and you were on staff at a church and I was home raising the kids, we couldn't afford to live on our own. And so we always had housemates. Honestly, that was one of the best things for us because it taught us how to
chill out.
Yeah, how to chill out. And we couldn't just fly off the handle. It was like if there was a disagreement, we'd look at each other get into the bedroom now. We need to have a conversation.
We need to talk.
And it really taught us other strategies of how to actually resolve this in a calm manner. Yeah. And it actually worked out to be a great thing for us and taught us other ways of communicating in a more healthy way.
Yeah. And we're physical beings. We are. So for me, one thing that was such a struggle for me was to let her have that space. Yeah. Because I thought, when I have space, I figure out 10 different scenarios of how this is going to end the poorest way possible. Yeah. Yeah. And then I fester on it, right? And then I'm and then I get seething angry by the time she comes back. That's how it would go at first. And I'm like, you've been gone for an hour and I'm ready to argue again. Let's restart this one because I have way better arguments this time. I've mapped it out. My argument is sound. You cannot beat me. Yeah. That's how I would go. So I figured she was doing the same thing.
Yeah. And she's not.
Yeah.
And so I needed to figure, I was like, I'm going crazy. Yeah. So I would just go for a run or something to physically let off some steam. Yeah. To go oh, this is actually going to help me calm down and not restart the argument. It'll help me solve it. Yeah. So figuring out how your body works as well. Wow. If you need 100%. Peace and quiet, if you need a walk, real. If you need fresh air, if you need a dark room and just sit in and just whatever. Sure. Those things really helped me. If you need a sad country song to cry to.
Right? Hey, I'm here for it.
No shame. No shame. No shame.
No. I think to summarize it, in those first years of marriage, the goal in conflict for us was to win. Whereas now the goal is resolution and reconciliation. Yeah. And that's just maturity. Yeah. And that's just us realizing what it takes to have a healthy marriage. Yeah. But that's been a major thing that we've learned for sure.
No, I love that. And I love too, because I think oftentimes we think well, your way was right and your way was wrong. Mm-hmm. When it's not one way is right or wrong. Yeah. It's finding what works for you, what's going to work in your marriage. And how do you want your kids to communicate as problem solvers, and showing them that, huge. And you can honor your family of origin and go, hey, you know what? I did pick up some great things from both of these different, circumstances. But now how do we want to problem solve and what do we want to show to our children?
So good.
To bring into their life. And, because I'm sure there'll be things our kids are like, oh, my parents did this and we are leaving that.
Isn't that a crazy thought that our kids are going to be in therapy because of us one day?
I'm really trying to avoid them going to therapy. That's okay. But, just thinking how can we best solve this? And that is, like you said, it's maturity, it's having grace and apologizing quickly. And I think that was a big thing, I know for us is learning how to just be like, you know what? I'm actually sorry that I said that. Yeah. You don't even have to make this an argument. Right. I was wrong. I flew off the handle. And then it's like, oh, okay. And having grace, like you said, you're human. Yeah. You're going to have a bad day. Yeah. So you're going to have a tough situation, a circumstance that comes up that triggers an emotion. And it's like, your marriage needs to be a safe space that you can feel those things, and navigate them. Yeah. It doesn't have to be an argument, And I think that was the thing is this isn't even an us issue. This is just an issue. Yeah. And we don't even need to argue. I just need you to be like, it's going to be okay.
Yeah. That's sometimes you just need me to listen. right?
Oh my God.
Like, I don't need to. I don't need to solve all.
Why'd you have to open up that can of worms? Why'd you have to go there? Julian? Like, come on.
That is hard though.
It's valid though, because you tell me a problem, I'm like, okay, well, this is what you do, and you're like, no, that's not what I'm asking.
Sometimes I'm like, could you
I just need you to be my safe place where I could just let it all out.
Exactly.
And then I'm good.
Usually I can kind of come to the solution when I'm saying it. I'm like, oh, yep, there it is. Thank you for just listening. Move on now.
That's one of those things that I wish I would have learned way earlier, is just if I can just be a better listener. And I'm still to this day, I will have to work on it and have to go, okay, I'm going to do this real quick and just listen. And not get offended by the things that she might bring, because my immediate offense is I'm going to get offended by what you're saying, even though it has nothing to do with me, right? And so and that's the childhood thing that you were talking about earlier, is we have to take our childhood, the things that we might have held on to for so long, and deal with those things, because if you don't, they're going to say something and it has nothing to do with you, and then it's going to turn into something that it doesn't need to be. And all of a sudden you guys are fighting and you don't even know what you're fighting about. And that's why we always talk about what is the root issue? What is the thing that it actually is causing this to happen inside of your life?
It's so true.
And when you start to deal with those things, you're going to be able to move forward faster and better, because you know that the issue is not the issue. And
it's
then you
so
start
true.
to work on the roots of everything that you have in your life. You're going to see these weeds come up. Just spray the weeds and get them out of there. And let the flowers grow.
It's so true.
I'm looking at my weeds in my backyard right now.
We had a lot of rain in Arizona this year, though. There's
I know, it's crazy. I actually had that conversation with my daughter last night, because she came home from her ballet lessons saying she's done. She doesn't want to do it anymore. She's had enough, And I started asking questions like, okay, are you tired? Were you hungry? Was your body kind of sore? And she was realizing, as she was answering these questions, that she doesn't actually hate ballet. She was just tired. She was just hungry, And so what you're saying, so much of the time, the issue isn't actually the issue. And that's so the case in marriage sometimes. It's like, I might come in and I might be, starving, exhausted, feeling emotional for whatever reason. He says something, I fly off the handle. It's not because of what he said. It's because all this background stuff was happening. And so having grace to recognize that and ask the questions like, hey, are you okay? What's going on? How was your day? Dig a little deeper than just the surfacey stuff.
And the issue is not the issue, but what's so important for me is your spouse is not the issue. Your spouse is not the enemy. It was that goes back to being on the same team. But it says in the word that you are of one flesh now when you're married. So it's that for me is so big, because even I need to have grace on you, even if I've said something to upset you, because who knows what's going on in the background. So it has to be about coming together and because I can so easily, Julian, what you were saying, is take on that, oh, I'm the issue. I'm the issue. Okay. And but
then, why don't you go do that in front of the mirror and come back and be like, yes, honey. The drama.
That's good.
Fair enough. Yeah. So each other is not the issue. It's the things underneath. Yeah. 100%. It's the roots. Yeah.
So we keep saying we need to be a team. We need to be a team. I think it's easy to say that, but how do we actually cultivate that in our marriage? How do we become an actual team and work together? Because we're selfish beings. We always want to think of ourselves first, our own needs and all that stuff. So what do you guys do to actually become a team and work together?
That's great. I'll speak to that first off, because I grew up playing sports, and I love sports. And I learned so many lessons about life in sports. And I was blessed to have a Christian football coach, just loved Jesus, but he taught us some big lessons, and he made it digestible for everybody. And team being if one of us hurts, we all hurt. If one of us wins, we all win. And that's biblical as well, and everything for me comes back to Jesus. It has to. It absolutely has to, because if I am on a team with my wife, how do I be humble enough to come to her with my issues, but also hold her up when she has issues? It's just like on a team, when one of your teammates fails, you pick them up and you pat them on the back and say, you're going to get it next time. Let's go. We're in this together, instead of what are you doing? Like, you messed up so bad. Yeah. Like, you don't see a good team doing that.
No.
Right.
But it takes humility. Yeah. So much humility to do that, because I feel like I need to be justified in what I want, right? Yeah. And so for me, the only way to be humble is to have a constant relationship with Jesus. For me, I've tried to do it without like going back to him, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And in our society today, humility is not celebrated. It's actually looked down upon in a lot of respects. Like, you score a touchdown, you're pointing at the back of your jersey. It's all me. I'm him. Like, what, all these little sayings. It's like, okay, that's cultivating a culture of pride.
Yeah.
And that's setting us up for a failure in marriages. Yeah. And we can see that reflected in statistics.
Oh, yes.
So humility for me is everything. And the only way for me that I have experienced to obtain that humility on a daily basis is a daily return to the Word of God, to Scripture, to prayer, and to going, I cannot do this without you.
Yeah.
Like, help.
Yeah. Okay.
That's where I start.
Yeah. I think for us in the season that we're in terms of, still having an early church plant as well, I think one of the very practical, very real, if I'm going to be honest, one of the real situations we find ourselves in right now is this tension between, the dream that we have in our hearts and then the reality of what we see. And that gap sometimes can be enough to crush you if you don't have the maturity to understand the process and understand the way that God works. He takes his time, and it's for good reason. Yeah. But that waiting season can be crushing. And one thing that we have learned, Adam's number one strength is positivity. But my number one struggle a lot of the time is discouragement.
Yeah.
And that sounds like it should complement each other, but it's also caused a lot of friction, because in moments of discouragement, Mr. Positivity comes in,
and you're like,
and it's like, but like, this is what we see, And so I think what we've learned in this last season for us is, how do we take the strengths that we both have and like ask the person, what do you need me to be in this moment? Yes. Like, how do you need me to respond to this? Like, if I'm having a moment of discouragement, he comes in, do you need me to listen? Do you need me to like pray over you? Do you need me to speak to what I see? Like, what do you actually need from me in this moment? Yeah. And rather than just bringing what feels natural to us, like offering to lay that down and ask them, what do they need? Like, what's going to serve them best in this area? That's just a very practical example.
Yeah.
Of one thing.
I love that.
That we
and it goes with the humility though, too, because to ask someone what they really need is humbling what you think they need,
right?
Yeah.
And doing what they actually need. Yeah. Because we want to just, okay, this is what we'll do. This is how we'll, fix it. Yeah. But it's like, no, going to them and saying, hey, how can I serve you today? And anything,
exactly.
Whether that's a moment of discouragement or it's, like coming to you and saying, hey, I'll make dinner tonight. I'll pick up the kids. You go for a walk. I see you need some time on your own. Yes. I need to come alongside you because you're having a day of discouragement or a moment. And knowing that you're not going to stay there. And I think that's the beautiful thing in marriage is we've seen this so often, the faithfulness of God in our marriage. And I know you guys have seen it too. Oftentimes, if I'm really struggling, Julian seems to really be doing really well.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's just so the Lord to know, like, hey, right now, Brittany's maybe more in a desert season. So I'm going to really be filling Julian so that he can really stand next to her and really, pull her up. And not that it's always like that. There's been seasons that we're both like, okay, who's going to suck it up today?
We both just lay in bed and cry together.
Does that happen? It's reality. Life
it is reality.
Hard.
It's tough.
It's tough. Yeah. And that's okay. We're not promised like that it's going to be easy. Nope. We're just promised that he will be there when we walk through it. Yeah. But I think that's just a beautiful way that God puts people together. Like you two, like if you're having that, then how can Adam serve you and how can you serve him? And it's about serving, which is also another, I would say, what is the word? Struggle, but like people are like serving. Well, that sounds like you're being lesser than. Well, it's like, yes, I'm lessening myself to have more of what the Lord would want me to do for you.
That's right.
And so that's, I love that. That's beautiful.
The pastor that married us, he actually, he met with us a few times before we started dating and just kind of talked us through. He was the first guy I ever dated, so it was a big deal for me. And so he kind of like talked us through the dating season, like the courting season, the dating season. Okay, are you guys talking about the future? Things like that. And then he ended up marrying us. But he and his wife also did our pre-marriage counseling.
Yeah.
And one of the best advice they gave us was prefer the other.
Yeah.
Prefer the other.
So good. Yeah.
And if you are both doing that at all times, it's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
But it does take both of you doing it. It's not always, it's not one preferring the other one all the time. No, that doesn't work. It has to be both of you submitting, both of you preferring one another, both of you serving one another.
Yeah.
And that's what helps a really healthy marriage to function.
No, I love that.
Yeah.
We say all the time that, you want to fix your spouse, right? Like we naturally be like, well, if they would just do this and this, but if you can really focus on what you need to grow in, how you can be your best self, you will show up as the best person in your marriage, like to be able to serve and love. Like the more I, seek the Lord, the more I'm in the word and praying and believing and casting vision, I show up so much better as a wife.
Totally.
Right.
And when I'm not, you can tell.
Yeah.
Like Julian will be like, you should go on a walk. Like 6 miles, 7, 8, Audible book. Here, listen to the whole 7 hours, honey.
I'll watch the kids.
It just sometimes, but it's like, what am I doing to cultivate the best Brittany that I can?
Yes.
It's very
so
true.
that I can show up for the people around me. No,
Yes.
I mean, we're all going to have days. We all have them.
For sure.
For sure.
But
Yeah. And that's tough sometimes too, though. That even takes humility, I find. If you're wired
it's so
anything
true.
like me,
Yeah.
I'll be like, because if you look at Enneagram stuff, I'm like a 2. I'm a helper.
the helper.
And so I get value from helping.
Yes.
And one of her love languages right now in this season is acts of service.
100%. She's
So-
a mom.
So yeah,
Vacuum
exactly.
that floor. Thank you very much.
Get over there.
Nothing
Got you, Mama.
Yeah, but I tend to then slip into that
Yeah.
and go, I'm just gonna serve and sacrifice myself and lay myself down and not look after myself. And so then I end up serving myself into a hole. And then I'm like a grouchy, grumpy, resentful.
Yes.
Because I'm trying to serve her and I'm trying to prefer her, but all of a sudden I've developed a resentment because I'm doing all this stuff. So sometimes it takes a lot of humility to look after yourself as well.
It's true.
It's very true.
Everything's
It's great.
attention, I find.
Yeah. Everything. Literally
Yes.
everything. If it's this, then there is that other pull.
Mm-hmm.
It's true because I serve hard everyone at all times. And if I don't take time for myself, I am wicked. Let's just say I can really, and not really not. And more of my internal speech. Like for me, I am a 6 on the Enneagram, so they don't say an inner critic. I have an inner committee, is what they would. It's negative to myself. Like I'm harder on myself than I would ever be on anybody else.
Yeah.
So if I'm not doing those, like you said, practical things too.
Yep.
Because for me, like getting up early, getting in the word, yes, it's spiritual, but it's actually practical. It's how I survive.
Absolutely.
And so it's those practices of, working out, eating healthy, drinking water. And it's so easy. Like you're like, it's so easy, but so hard.
Yeah. It's simple, but it's not easy to do.
Difficult.
It's true.
Yeah.
And I'm like this.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I'm like
steady Freddy.
Oh yeah. Always. If you just need a solid person around, just call Julian.
Yeah.
I'll be there.
There's been a few, in our marriage.
I've had a couple dips.
But I mean, me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I try.
Yeah.
I mean, but sometimes I'm like, oh, I can do this. And I'm like, oh, it's fine.
Yeah.
If you ever need a good smile and a hug, just go to this guy.
Yeah.
Every time I've ever seen him, those pearly whites and that one.
Honestly, you guys. And that's the thing is people are like, I'm sure people are like, is he really like that? Like, does he like go home and yell at his kids and wife? No. He's so calm. He doesn't raise his voice. And I don't either. I'm not wicked.
It's funny because if I do talk a little louder, she'll be like, are you mad at me? I'm like, I'm not even mad at all. Like, we're good.
We're fine.
He's always happy. Always believes the best in people.
Yes.
Sometimes to a fault.
They're can get me
so
in trouble,
funny.
for
Thinks
sure.
everything's going to just work out great. And you're like, it's on fire. Like,
It's like, but I did some worm,
Exactly.
We're going to laugh about
thing
this.
of like complimenting, because there's so many ways
true.
that I'm like, had I married someone more similar to me, holy bananas. It would
Yeah.
be like so difficult. I could imagine it would be really hard.
Yeah.
It would have been a war for sure. I got you. I'm here for you. Well,
Make myself look really bad.
This is such a good conversation, and I think everything you guys said was so valuable.
Yeah.
And I think it brings a lot of light to even just the simple things, you know.
Yeah.
We are a team. Like, a lot of people don't understand what that really means and how to actually do it. And so it's so important that we learn to actually be a team and work together. And it's so important that you realize that you don't marry someone just like yourself. It's so good to marry someone who's different and opposite of you. And the things that might drive you crazy might be the best thing for you, because it's going to stretch you and push you to make you better, you know, because there's, like you said, you at a fault will be, what was the word you used? Discouraged. You'll be discouraged, and he's going to see the best, and he's going to help you, lift you up. And so that's such a good thing. Positive. And if when there's discouragement, what's the best thing for you? It's to have someone to be positive around you.
Absolutely.
And then for you, it's good to have someone around you who's going to help you come back to your feet and see reality.
Back to reality.
Okay, listen, we actually do have to pay bills. So
That's right.
I understand that you're loving life, but let's make some money. You know? And so it's a good thing to be. Totally. So if you're out there and you're thinking like, they're just so different from me, man, embrace the difference. Embrace them so that you can take that on and really complete yourself, because that's what it is. You come together, you become one, right? You're completing each other. And so the things that are missing from your life most likely is in your spouse. You just don't know you don't know why it drives you crazy, but it's actually the thing that will actually make you a better person. And so let's learn to embrace those things, you know. But we're so grateful for you guys coming out here. Did you have anything else that you wanted to say or ask? Okay. But we're so grateful for you guys to coming out here. Again, we're going to say it again. If you're in Phoenix, Tempe, Chandler, Gilbert, wherever you're at in this area, there's a great church waiting for you, RKO. If you already go to a church, don't leave them, just to come to us. But if you are looking for a great place to go, RKO Church is the best place. We'll put a link to the website so that you guys can get all the information there. And then Adam and Juliette, we are so grateful once again. Thank you so much for coming and joining us in this conversation. Thank you for sharing your story and being vulnerable with us.
Absolutely.
It's such a good time. Absolutely. We're so grateful. But thank you. And if you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe. You just become a part of our community here at Young, Dumb, and in Love. We'll see you next week.